She had her arms in the air, looking right into her friend's eyes, screaming. Then the 13-foot monster pulled her back under the murky water, and Ginger Faye Meadows was gone forever. In 24 hours, she would have turned 25. Instead, her body would be found floating in the crocodile-infested waters of Cascade Falls. But what you're about to hear, what her friend Jane witnessed in those final horrifying seconds, will haunt you long after this story ends. Because Ginger didn't just die, she was warned. She was told exactly what would happen if she entered that water. And she did it anyway. The captain's voice echoed across the water. "Don't so much as dangle a foot in the water." But it was already too late. The massive saltwater crocodile was already moving, already hunting, already focused on the two American women who had just made the deadliest mistake of their lives. But to understand how a bright, beautiful model from Colorado ended up in the jaws of Australia's most feared predator, we need to go back to when Ginger Meadows was still alive, still dreaming, still believing that nothing could touch her. Her name was Ginger Faye Meadows, 24 years old, part-time model from Snowmass Village, Colorado. Long blonde hair, infectious smile, and a spirit that couldn't be contained by small-town life. She dreamed of adventure, of seeing the world, of living life on her own terms. March 1987. Ginger was working her passage aboard the luxury vessel, Lady G, sailing from Perth to Darwin along Australia's treacherous northwestern coast. She wasn't just a tourist. She was the ship's chef assistant, earning her way through one of the world's most dangerous waterways. But she didn't know about the danger yet. She had no idea what was waiting for her in those brown, murky waters. What inspired this deadly journey? A movie. Crocodile Dundee had just hit theaters, and like millions of others, Ginger fell in love with the rugged Australian wilderness. She wanted to experience it herself, touch it, swim in it. She had no idea that the real Australia was nothing like the movies, that the crocodiles here weren't props or special effects. They were prehistoric killing machines that had perfected their hunting techniques over millions of years, and they were waiting. March 29, 1987, the day that would change everything. The Lady G anchored near Cascade Falls in the Prince Regent River. The crew prepared to explore the waterfall, climbing the rocky face to reach the top. But Ginger and her friend Jane Burchett had other plans. Plans that Captain Bruce Fitzpatrick would never forgive himself for allowing. The warning was crystal clear. Captain Fitzpatrick looked directly at Ginger Meadows and said the words that should have saved her life. "Do not so much as dangle a foot in the water." He knew these waters. He'd sailed them for years. He knew what lived beneath the surface of Cascade Falls. Saltwater crocodiles, the apex predators of northern Australia, creatures that could grow up to 20 feet long and had a bite force stronger than a T-Rex. But Ginger was young. She was adventurous. She was American, and she thought she was invincible. While the rest of the crew climbed the waterfall, Ginger and Jane made their way to the water's edge. The brown water looked inviting in the Australian heat. Peaceful, safe. They had no idea they were being watched. Somewhere beneath the surface, a 4-meter saltwater crocodile had detected their movement, their heat signatures, their vibrations in the water. It began to move, slowly, silently, like death itself approaching. Ginger and Jane waded into the water, waist deep, laughing, enjoying what they thought would be a refreshing swim. The waterfall cascaded behind them, creating a wall of white noise that drowned out everything else, including the captain's desperate screams from above. Because Bruce Fitzpatrick had spotted something that made his blood run cold, a massive shape moving through the water, heading directly toward the two women who had no idea they were about to become prey. Jane Burchett would never forget what happened next. The way the water suddenly seemed to part, the way a prehistoric nightmare rose from the depths like something from a horror movie. It swam right up to us and had its mouth open. 13 feet of pure killing machine, jaws that could snap a human in half, eyes that showed no emotion, no mercy, no recognition that these were living, breathing human beings. Just prey. In that moment of absolute terror, Jane did the only thing she could think of. She took off her shoe and threw it at the monster's head. It was a pathetic defense against a creature that had survived since the age of dinosaurs. But somehow, miraculously, it worked. The crocodile closed its mouth, submerged, disappeared. For a brief, beautiful moment, they thought they were safe. They thought the nightmare was over. They backed against the waterfall wall, hearts pounding, minds struggling to process what had just happened. But the crocodile hadn't left. It had simply changed tactics. When the crocodile vanished beneath the surface, Ginger made the decision that would cost her everything. Instead of staying still, instead of waiting for help, she let go of Jane's arm and tried to swim for shore. She jumped off the ledge, took 2 strokes. 2 strokes. That's all she managed. 2 desperate strokes towards safety before the nightmare became reality. It grabbed her around the waist and pulled her right under the water. In an instant, Ginger Faye Meadows disappeared beneath the surface. The water turned red. Jane stood frozen in absolute horror, watching her friend vanish into the jaws of a creature that evolution had designed to kill. But the horror wasn't over. What happened next would haunt Jane Burchett for the rest of her life. Then he pulled her up out of the water right in front of me. I looked her right in the face. She had her arms in the air and she was looking right at me. Eye contact. In that final, terrible moment, Ginger and Jane looked directly at each other. One woman helpless in the jaws of death, the other helpless to save her. Then it pulled her back under the water, and Ginger Faye Meadows was gone. The creature that killed Ginger wasn't just any crocodile. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles on Earth. They can grow up to 23 feet long and weigh over 2,000 pounds. Their bite force measures 3,700 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a car. They're ambush predators, patient, intelligent. They can remain motionless for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When they attack, it's with explosive speed and devastating force. But here's what makes them truly terrifying. They don't just bite and release. They perform what's called a death roll, spinning their victim underwater until they drown. Then they store the body underwater for days or weeks, waiting for it to decompose enough to tear apart and consume. The crew of the Lady G launched an immediate search operation, but finding a body in crocodile-infested waters is nearly impossible. The creatures are known to drag their victims to underwater caves or wedge them beneath logs and rocks. Captain Fitzpatrick radioed for help. Local authorities arrived with boats and divers. They searched through the night, knowing that every hour reduced their chances of finding Ginger alive. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. No one survives a saltwater crocodile attack, especially not in waters this remote, this dangerous. March 30th, 1987. What should have been Ginger's 25th birthday became the day her body was recovered from Cascade Falls. 25 years old. That's all she got. 25 years of dreams, hopes, adventures, and possibilities, cut short by a creature that saw her as nothing more than food. Her family back in Snowmass Village, Colorado, was planning a birthday celebration. They had no idea their daughter was floating in the murky waters of a remote Australian river. Her life ended by a split-second decision to ignore a warning that could have saved her. The most tragic part? Ginger came to Australia because of Crocodile Dundee, a movie that romanticized the Australian wilderness. That made it seem adventurous, exciting, safe. But the real Australia isn't like the movies. The real Australia is unforgiving, deadly. It doesn't care if you're young, beautiful, or full of dreams. It doesn't care if tomorrow is your birthday. Nature doesn't negotiate. It doesn't give second chances. And it certainly doesn't care about Hollywood fantasies. Jane Burchett survived. But surviving a crocodile attack when your friend doesn't creates a special kind of hell. Survivor's guilt, nightmares. The constant replay of those final moments when Ginger looked her in the eyes. What do you say to the family? How do you explain that you watched their daughter die and couldn't do anything to stop it? How do you live with the knowledge that you threw a shoe at a monster while your friend was being torn apart? The answer is, you don't. You just exist. You carry that image with you forever. Captain Bruce Fitzpatrick gave clear warnings. He told them exactly what would happen if they entered the water. But warnings don't matter if people don't listen. He watched from above as the crocodile approached, screamed at them to get out. But sound travels strangely over water, and by the time they understood the danger, it was too late. For a ship captain, losing a passenger is the ultimate failure, even when that passenger ignores every safety protocol, even when they make decisions that guarantee their own death. From the crocodile's point of view, this wasn't murder. It wasn't evil. It was just Tuesday. Saltwater crocodiles don't attack humans out of malice. They attack because we enter their territory, because we become prey items in their environment, because millions of years of evolution have programmed them to kill anything that moves through their water. The 4-meter crocodile that killed Ginger was just following its instincts. It detected movement, identified a food source, and acted accordingly. It had no concept of birthdays, dreams, or the devastating impact its actions would have on families thousands of miles away. News of Ginger's death spread quickly through the sailing community. Another cautionary tale, another reminder that the Australian wilderness doesn't care about your nationality, your age, or your dreams. The Lady G continued its journey to Darwin, but the mood had changed. The adventure was over. The romance of the Australian coast had been replaced by the harsh reality of what happens when humans underestimate nature. Ginger's body was repatriated to the United States. Her family buried their daughter instead of celebrating her birthday. The woman who came to Australia seeking adventure found death instead. You'd think Ginger's death would serve as a warning to others, but every year tourists continue to ignore crocodile safety warnings. They take selfies near the water's edge. They swim in prohibited areas. They assume that because they're on vacation, somehow the laws of nature don't apply to them. Since 1987, dozens more people have died in crocodile attacks across northern Australia. Each death preventable. Each victim warned about the dangers. Each tragedy a direct result of human arrogance meeting prehistoric efficiency. What if Ginger had listened to Captain Fitzpatrick's warning? What if she had celebrated her 25th birthday, surrounded by family in Colorado, instead of floating in the Prince Regent River? What if she had never seen Crocodile Dundee? What if she had chosen a different adventure, a different path, a different fate? What if she had understood that in the wild, there are no second chances, no movie magic, no happy endings guaranteed? The truth is simple and brutal. Nature doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care if tomorrow is your birthday. Nature operates on one principle: survival of the fittest. And in the murky waters of Cascade Falls, a 13-foot saltwater crocodile was infinitely more fit for survival than a 24-year-old model from Colorado. Ginger Faye Meadows learned this lesson too late. She paid for her education with her life. Somewhere in the Australian wilderness, Cascade Falls still thunders into the Prince Regent River. The water still runs brown with sediment, and beneath the surface, saltwater crocodiles still wait with prehistoric patience for the next meal to wade into their domain. Jane Burchett's words echo across the years. She had her arms in the air, and she was looking right at me. That image, Ginger's final moment looking into her friend's eyes as death dragged her under, remains frozen in time. A reminder that adventure and tragedy are often separated by nothing more than a single fatal decision. The next time you're tempted to ignore a safety warning, remember Ginger Faye Meadows. Remember that she was young, beautiful, and full of life. Remember that she had dreams and plans and people who loved her. And remember that none of that mattered to the creature that killed her. Because in nature's courtroom there are no appeals, no pardons, no mercy. There is only survival or death. And on March 29, 1987, one day before her 25th birthday, Ginger Faye Meadows learned which one she had chosen.